Working It Out, a podcast show about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplaces, our communities, and our lives. A show where we put diversity and inclusion to work.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Working It Out. On this episode, I'm joined by Sue-Ann Hong, who is president and CEO of the Center for Asian Pacific American Women. Prior to this, Sue-Ann was with the State Farm Insurance Companies for over 28 years, and she was in a range of positions that are contributing to the brilliance she's bringing to this position. And I must say, I first met Sue-Ann years ago in the Lead Hership Coalition created by Working Mother Media and Walmart. So Sue-Ann, it is so great to have you be a part of our show again and for me to see you again.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Dr. Weaver. I am thrilled to be here and very honored during a May Heritage Month.
Well, so much has happened since we last connected, and we're looking forward to hearing your update on the status of Asian American women in our post-pandemic world. So before we dive into what it is that you do and how you're leading this incredible organization, I always pretty much ground our audience in some factoids to set the stage for our conversation. So let me share with you about 3 of them. According to NBC News, the biggest obstacle facing Asian American women is their double discrimination because of their race and gender. And this is interesting because a lot of times they talk about this double discrimination within the context of the Black woman experience. But it's also true for Asian Americans. It's not just unique to Black women. And interestingly, only one Asian American woman for every 2 men, Asian American men, is promoted to the senior leadership level. And this disparity becomes even more apparent when we talk about the C-suite. In that situation, only 1 Asian American woman for every 6 Asian American men gets promoted. And we know something that's interesting about that factor, because in the work that we do with alignment strategies, and I know that you do in your organization, we know that one of the top concerns that Asian Americans have is the disparity in promotions that they get in organizations. So if you look at the whole universe of Asian Americans saying we don't really get our fair share of promotions, and the data supports that, can you imagine then when you look at that on a smaller base of Asian Americans that are getting promoted? And so really Asian American women are having a triple whammy in this. And then sadly, the Harvard Business Review reported that the racialization of COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the racism against all Asians in all corners of society, especially in the workplace. Between 2022, the formal beginning of COVID, and 2021, anti-Asian hate crimes rose by 339%, not 3% or not 3.9%, 339%. And the passage of time since 2021 has not helped either, as more and more people blame Asian Americans for the pandemic. So now, Sue-Ann, I would love for you to tell us how these factoids impact the status of Asian American women in business today. So I was going to say, just go with that question. How's that playing out on Asian American women in the workplace?
Well, first of all, again, I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate this very important conversation. The Center for Asian Pacific American Women is an organization that focuses on development of compassionate, ethical leadership for AAPI women, and recently also for women of color. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But we've been around since 1995, and our Asian Pacific American Women's Leadership Institute started in 1996 in first class. So We have over 170 plus graduates of our program, and we're in the third class for the Unleash the Shiro and You cohort, which is
Oh,
the 5 years or less cohort, in the professional workforce. But let me address something that was very important that you talked about in terms of the statistics for Asian American women and promotions and advancement. You would think that after all these years in 2023, we would be in a much better place. But at the end of the day, according to the McKinsey and leanin.org study, the Women in the Workplace studies, 1 in 4 women are in C-suite, 1 in 20 women of color are in C-suite, and 1 in 50 Asian American women are in C-suite. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. One has to do with the stereotype of how Asian American women are perceived in terms of their demure, they don't speak up, the expectation is that they're different, they don't show leadership skills. There's a lot of stereotypes that go around the cultural aspect of the Asian American woman. She's also hypersexualized. And so these are some examples of why sometimes there's a perception that Asian American women are not in decision-making tables, nor are they looked upon as high potential candidates. However, what I find is that when you have that along then with the anti-Asian hate and what's going on there, and I personally have had, issues, incident in Atlanta even when it came to anti-Asian hate, but you're talking about 11,500 reports from Stop AAPI hate since the pandemic started. And the fact that that's probably underrated because as Asian American culturally, we don't like to report. We don't, we're afraid of reporting. We don't like to, to even share those types of information many times. So it's probably conservative. And so I think those are some examples of some of the challenges. So that third pane is that anti-Asian hate COVID-19 issue that I think we've faced. So those are some examples and some of the challenges that we face.
Well, interestingly, Sue, and I was reading one study, and it indicated that even, with the low reporting of the anti-Asian hate, there still is Asian women still are the majority of recipients of the hate.
Absolutely. And when you look at the statistics, I remember the first at least 2-3 reports indicated that 2/3 of the reports were, first of all, verbal harassment. But then of that, verbal harassment majority, like 2/3, 1/4 to 2/3 were all Asian women. Now, that may have to do with the stature of these Asian American women who are maybe small in stature. They're small, they look young. They, they don't talk back. They don't, necessarily push back if something's going on, or they'll back down. They don't ask for help. So all these things could contribute to why they're easy targets, especially out in public. And so I personally had an incident as well.
Share
and
with
like
us,
I said,
please.
Yes, I was coming back from a leadership conference, ironically, after having a keynote conversation about leadership and what they could do to support Asian American women. And I was on the train. I was in the, about halfway home, and this gentleman got on the train and started addressing me as Chinese. Well, first of all, I'm South Korean. I'm not even Chinese. And so he started saying some racial slurs, and he had like a couple flasks in his hand. So I didn't know if he had mental issues. I didn't know if he was drunk. I didn't know if he was homeless. And then he started demanding money from the passenger. So I was like, okay, I got to be cautious. The thing that made me, I think, really sad was the fact that there was nobody that was stepping in on my behalf, or they didn't say anything. They all kind of, like, literally the two ladies sitting next to me churned their body away from me. And so I don't think people wanted to be involved. And so he started to stand next to me and started kind of touching me and started to say, like, I see the ring that you're wearing. I see that, I could take that, snatch that, your luggage, that could be snatched at any moment. So he started to kind of threaten me a little bit. So I said, you need to stop touching me. And then he said, you need to shut the F up, and started to kind of say things to me because he was upset that I talked back to him. But you know what? Leading a Asian American women's organization, I could not possibly sit there and just say nothing and take it. I just couldn't do it. And so I said, you need to stop talking to me. And then he got very upset. And I said, okay, don't like look away. Just keep looking at him, eye contact. Don't stand up. I was like running through all these things in my mind because I said, I don't want to provoke him to physically attack me. And if worst case scenario, I'll use my luggage to like push him out of the train. Like I was thinking through all of these scenarios. So at the next stop, he started to slowly back out and he was still talking. And then the doors closed and then I was fine. And then the lady, when the train stopped and she was getting ready to set up, she goes, I'm so sorry that happened. And I'm like, you didn't say anything. So that was a good example of probably what's typical. The only thing that was atypical is that probably somebody else wouldn't have said anything.
So let me ask you, Sue Ann, when you think about that, now that's you coming from the airport onto a train to go home. What are the women in your courses reporting that happens to them when they're actually, say, in the office or at the plant or, doing their jobs, or are they?
So, yeah, so I always say that the office is a microcosm of society. Now, people are smart enough for the most part of not to be so blatant at the office. But what I would call microaggression, where, there's subtle things, kind of like where are you from questions. Where are you really from? I'm from New York. I'm from Michigan. But what they're really trying to ask is, the whole, where are you from?
Yes.
And so I think part of what we're trying to figure out is, okay, that makes me feel like I'm a perpetual foreigner in my own country.
Correct.
And the fact that I am a United States citizen, I pay taxes, I work for a living, I support, I'm a good public servant. So I think part of how that shows up could be that, or some of the things that the women tell me is that they don't get heard at the office. So they'll try to speak, or they get spoken over, or they don't get a chance to share their ideas, or it's minimized, or they just kind of get interrupted, as an example. And some of these things are not just Asian American women.
Yeah.
Some of these are women in general. Some are women of color. But when it happens consistently, you start to wonder, okay, what is going on here? Right?
That's such a great point, because we've done work with companies that, like an Eli Lilly or Procter and Gamble or J&J, that really have a sensitivity and appreciation, my farm alignment strategies, for the multicultural women and the issues that they go through. And it's amazing 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and now it's the same report out. We're not heard, we're not given opportunities for promotion. There are key strategic relationships that are important to have, because those relationships position you for more roles and better connects, and they're not getting those at the level or at the pace that they want to get them. So my question to you is, as you think about your Center for Asian Pacific American Women, what are some of the programs or initiatives that you have in place that prepare women to handle some of those unfortunately consistent concerns and complaints that they have about their lived experience in the workplace?
That is the crux of what we're trying to address, to your point. And let me give you an example. So, a lot of times the Asian women, they don't negotiate at the beginning of their salary. They don't negotiate. They don't know how to negotiate. They feel almost bad negotiating. And then they don't ask for what they want. And on top of that, it takes them longer to step up into that first level leadership position. Because we have to check off like 100% of all of the things that are on that list to be promoted, where the average white man, maybe they're okay with half. They're like, I'm qualified. But this is what I'm consistently hearing. So here's an example. So our women of color cohort, which is the Unleash This Year ONU cohort, I started that after the whole incident of the Atlanta spa shootings, which was horrific. And basically, it wasn't categorized as a hate crime towards Asian Americans.
Yeah, because I think the sheriff said he had a bad day.
Exactly. You just want to go, really? What about these families and women? Do you think that they may have had a bad day?
Right.
So this is where I think there's a lack of sensitivity. And so part of what I wanted to do was, instead of waiting till mid-career for these women to learn about these things, I want to move everything to the front end in the first 5 years that they're working. And that couple examples. One is they don't have the network. Well, guess what? I'm going to help you build one. Just within the cohort of 30 to 35 women, you've all across the country now. Your network just increased incredibly, right? Because you've got people in nonprofit, government, entrepreneurship, academia, as well as corporate America. So you want to be able to provide a network where they don't have this. They only know their world.
Right.
So that's one. Another example of something we provide is a opportunity to figure out what is their life purpose. And when I talk about life purpose, it's like, what gives you meaning? What gives you purpose? What drives you? And by the way, is what you're doing aligned to what is important to you? And if not, what are you going to do about that? But do it consciously. Make conscious choices. And the other thing that I notice is 100%, because we work with a cultural anthropologist at Relations Research to interview these women, is that 100% of the cohort that came in and said, I need to work on my own self-confidence, meaning advocating for myself. 100% of the women said. And so I said, this can't be the way that we leave these women for the next another 5 years.
Yes.
So I'm like, we've got to figure out how to do that. So these are all things that we're doing to build the self-confidence of these women. And they're doing it by sharing of themselves. They're sharing their stories, and it's an environment where they can be heard deeply. And they're validated for who they are. And you don't need to explain to me why you are the way they are, except for just tell me your story.
Right.
And I think that's really significant.
That's wonderful. Let me ask you, Sue-Ann, because as I listen to you, this seems to be a very introspective kind of experience where women have an opportunity to think about the I, me, my piece of it. But are you suggesting that the solution to these issues are to work with the women, to have the women work on themselves only?
So there's a couple different things. It's not the only, but it's where we start.
Okay.
So I think the way that we look at it is, hey, you got to be comfortable with who you are. You got to know your own identity. Because what I notice is that some of the women, Asian women and others, they are contemplating their identity, who they are, and they may be mixed races, and they're looking at, okay, who am I really? And I'm exploring these different cultural aspects about myself. So there's a lot of exploration that we give space for. And I think that's important because that's the core of who you are, how you feel, and that's personal.
Right.
And so that's where we start. Now, then we talk about the interpersonal. Then at the end, we talk about community impact, where for the Unleash the Shiro in You program, we say, okay, we've invested all this in you, but now it's time for you to go out and impact 25 or more people in community. And by the way, the topic's got to be something around racism and pushing up against racism. The Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute, we're a little bit broader in terms of what we say you can do with your impact project, but normally it ends up being something around equity related projects. And so that's one of the things that we really wanted to be focusing on. Is it's not just about you at the end of the day, it's about what are you doing to pay it forward. So yeah.
What I love about what you're doing is that you're saying, okay, let's do our own self-check first. Because we know all of these points of inequity and discrimination and racism are out here and they're real. but let's make sure we take an opportunity. That's what I'm hearing you say and do. Let's take this as an opportunity to kind of connect with what matters to us or understand what makes us tick and put some time and focus on that and then expand that outward. I love it. I love it. I absolutely love it. Because I think
go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say my
Dr. Weaver.
experience, doing this work has shown that when you start there and get people grounded in their own sense of purpose and their own sense of who they are, and what are those things that they might be doing to contribute to some of the challenges that they have, you have a stronger person to go out there and advocate for the rights of others and for their own right.
I love, you said it so beautifully. And one of the things that I think is important is that our philosophy at CAPA has always been, it's about the whole person leadership. So when I say whole person, that includes, yes, relational, intellectual, financial, physical/nutrition, and then also cultural. And so when you have to almost address, in corporate America, we're very skill set oriented. And so we focus on building your skill set, building your leadership skills. And when we consider you a high potential, you have to kind of elevate at a certain level before we'll promote you. So
I'm sorry, I'm just so excited listening to you. I'm just wondering, how do people get involved? How do these women connect to you and get involved? Are they working for organizations or companies and they send so many women to you, or do you go into these companies? How does that work?
All those things. So everything that I've done has been through networking. So I'll reach out to our networks. I will reach out to graduates of the program, and because really, frankly, they're the best ones to recruit because they know the program.
Yes.
And they believe in it. So when I send them out, and talk about their experience, and by the way, for their graduation this year at the Women of Color Conference in Houston, each graduate went up to stage and they recited their life purpose statement.
Oh my!
I don't think there was a dry eye in the house, so it's so meaningful. I want them to really invest in themselves. So they can reach me through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Sue Ann Hong, or you can look at CAPA. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, as well as Twitter.
And we're going to have your information on our website as well. So
absolutely.
That the viewers of our show, the listeners to the podcast part, will also be able to reach out to you because the work that you're doing is just awesome.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate your support, because doing things like this, having the conversation and creating space, it allows other people to engage and to find out more about what can be done to make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you. So given you say it's a place where you start, and I think that's phenomenal. Do you have an opportunity to work with supervisors of these women to get them to understand?
Oh, it's so interesting you say this. I don't currently. So first of all, I'm one person employee with a part-time assistant, and then I contract out everybody, and then there's volunteers. So we're in the midst of a growth stage in our organization. So I think as we grow, we'll have to talk through that a little bit, because I think there is something to be said about culturally competent leaders.
Yes.
And how we can foster that to then support these women as they move up in the organization, or whatever they want to do. Yeah,
I so agree with you on that. We've been doing work. My company, Alignment Strategies, has been doing work with supervisors of multicultural women, because, based on the Gallup research and et cetera, people leave those supervisors, not the organization, they leave supervisors who have not been as effective in growing and developing their talent. And so the work that women must do with ourselves is essentially important, but it's also important, we found, that the supervisors enhance their skill sets to work with multicultural women, whether they be Asian American, Latina, African American, whatever diversity, that they really have to become better equipped. And it's interesting, the work that you're doing will also probably support the women in helping their supervisors understand how they could be better at leading and managing them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's helpful too is that they will actually speak up and say their opinion, and not apologize for that.
Yeah.
I said, my thing is they don't have to say yes, but at least don't say no to yourself first.
Yeah, or apologize for having to provide some straight talk about maybe how they were treated or not treated well, but to apologize, which kind of negates almost what the follow-up conversation is going to be. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's
Absolutely. I have one example of somebody I just talked to 2 days ago, and she told me, based on our conversation and the lessons and whatnot, she negotiated her salary and she ended up getting the higher salary because she actually, went through why she should get it. I said, well, there you go. That's what I want you to do. It's not all about you just because you want more money. What is it that you're contributing?
Yeah. How does it add value? Exactly.
That's right. That's right. And they said yes. And they gave her the number of vacation days that she wanted. So we got to negotiate.
Yep. You got to negotiate. So let me ask you, when we think of the anti-Asian hate and the fact that Asian women are high recipients of that because of assumptions they make about them being smaller and more vulnerable and less able to protect themselves, are there any particular actions that you recommend that the women do? Because I was struck by your example about yourself when you said, here I am leading this organization, I need to speak up. And you said to the man, don't speak to me anymore. I know I'm paraphrasing what you said, right, but basically you told him, enough is enough. Are there particular techniques or steps that you're strongly recommending that Asian women take if they find themselves being accosted like you were?
So what's interesting is there are a couple of organizations that are doing bystander training. So as an example, OCA National is doing something called situational awareness training as an example. So that's OCA. And they have, safe ways where you can intervene. It's techniques. So that's one situation. And then there's another, the Asian American Advancing Justice also supports bystander training, and they partner with other organizations to do that. So I think those are good examples of where we don't want you to just step in, and then get yourself hurt. It's what can we do that's much more thoughtful and making sure that we're not putting people in harm's way, but you can still support somebody who's going through this difficult situation.
Okay, great. So your recommendation is that Asian women and Asians in general undergo bystander training, and I think that's a great one.
Yeah, and it's not just Asian. I would say everybody needs to take bystander training. I
was thinking the same thing about myself. Yeah.
That's helpful because we have got to be advocates for one another because, like I said I just feel like we rotate communities.
Well, I tell you, Sue Ann, this has been an incredible conversation, and I know we have lots more to talk about. But I wanted to ask this question: Is your organization? Do you have membership, or how can you get connected?
To me, I can definitely figure out a place for you if you want to be involved. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, Sue Ann Hong, and I think that's a great place to start.
Well, I tell you, on behalf of our audience, I know that they learned a lot and enjoyed this conversation you and I have been engaged in. And so we asked our audience, if you enjoyed this conversation, please like us and share our episode and subscribe to the Working It Out podcast. And we would also love a review so that we can understand how to better serve you. So I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Working It Out. And on behalf of our Working It Out podcast crew, I wish you a safe, productive, and what we call Be Happy week. Goodbye.
Working It Out is brought to you by Alignment Strategies, a management consultancy with more than 3 decades of experience in diversity, equity and inclusion, and organizational development. To learn more, visit alignmentstrategies.com.
Got problems on the job, we're working it out. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out.